Theseus sailed for Crete not as a hero, but as a sacrifice. He was one of 7 youths and 7 maidens sent to be thrown into the labyrinth, a prison from which no one ever returned. What he expected to find inside that sprawling maze was a monster, a beast with the head of a bull and the appetite of a god. But what he actually found was something far more tragic. And the story we have been told for 3,000 years has been a lie built on a foundation of royal shame. King Minos did not lock a monster in that maze. He hid his own son. We all think the Minotaur was a ferocious half-man, half-bull creature that devoured human flesh. But the reality is that the original myth never described a monster at all. The earliest accounts from Greek sources speak of Asterion, a prince born with a severe craniofacial deformity. The name Minotaur means bull of Minos, but this was a cruel nickname, not a biological description. Ancient medical texts describe conditions like craniofrontonasal dysplasia and severe hyperostosis, where the bones of the face and skull grow abnormally thick and distorted, creating what looked like a snout and horns. Prince Asterion was not born from a union between a woman and a sacred bull. That was the cover story. The truth is that Queen Pasiphae had an affair with a palace guard, and when the child emerged with a hideous deformity, King Minos could not publicly execute his own infant without admitting to the scandal. So he commissioned the greatest architect of the age to build a prison so complex that no one would ever find the boy. Daedalus designed the labyrinth not as a death trap, but as a sealed ward. The twisting corridors were meant to keep Asterion contained and hidden from foreign diplomats and local nobles who might spread word of the king's shame. For nearly 2 decades, the prince lived alone in that underground complex. He was fed through chutes and attended by slaves who were sworn to silence and never allowed to see his face uncovered. The Athenian tributes were not sent to be eaten. They were sent to be forgotten. Every 9 years, the kingdom of Athens had to send 14 citizens to Crete as a tribute of submission, and King Minos used the labyrinth as a permanent black site. None of those tributes ever returned to Athens, not because they were killed by a beast, but because they were worked to death in the palace quarries or sold to foreign slave markets. The story of the man-eating Minotaur was propaganda designed to terrify Athens into compliance and to ensure that no one ever asked what really happened inside the maze. When Theseus arrived on Crete, he did not come armed with a sword to slay a monster. He brought a ball of thread. Princess Ariadne had fallen in love with him at first sight, and she knew the secret of the labyrinth because she had been sneaking food to her half-brother for years. She gave Theseus the thread and told him that the creature inside was not a beast, but a broken man who had never known human touch. Theseus walked the corridors for hours, following the echo of weeping, until he found Asterion curled in a stone chamber, emaciated and terrified. The prince had never learned to speak. He had never stood upright for more than a few minutes, because his skull was so heavy that his neck muscles had atrophied. He did not charge at Theseus with bared teeth. He covered his face and whimpered. Theseus had come prepared to kill a monster, but what he found was a 20-year-old man who had spent his entire life in darkness, beaten and starved by the guards who were supposed to care for him. The hero did what any person would do when confronted with such a sight. He sat down beside Asterion and waited. The killing did not happen in the labyrinth. It happened 3 days later, after Theseus had escaped with Ariadne and the other tributes. The prince was brought up to the palace courtyard in chains, and King Minos ordered a public execution to maintain the fiction of the monster. The people of Knossos never saw a bull-headed beast. They saw a disfigured young man being bludgeoned to death by royal guards while the king declared that the Minotaur had been slain. Theseus played along because his survival depended on it. He returned to Athens with Ariadne and claimed he had killed the monster with his bare hands. The story spread because it was useful. It made Theseus a hero. It made Minos a king who had conquered a supernatural threat, and it buried the truth so deeply that even today, most people refuse to believe that a myth about a monster could actually be a story about a disabled prince who was locked away because his own father could not bear to look at him. Here is the hardest fact to accept about this entire story. There is no archaeological evidence that a half-human, half-bull creature ever existed. There is overwhelming archaeological evidence that the Palace of Knossos had a complex underground structure with multiple levels and dead-end corridors. That human remains found in the surrounding quarries match the age range of the Athenian tributes, and that ancient Cretan medical texts describe a condition called bull face in infants born to noble families. The myth of the Minotaur is not a fantasy. It is a medical diagnosis disguised as a legend. The absurd part is that we have known this for over a century. Classical scholars in the late 1800s noticed that no Greek historian before the 5th century BCE ever described the Minotaur as having an actual bull's head. They simply said he was bull-like or of bull appearance. The monstrous version did not appear until Roman poets embellished the tale for dramatic effect. The idea you have in your head right now, the image of a giant humanoid bull roaring in a maze, is a Roman invention, not a Greek one. The Greek version was a story about a disfigured prince, and the Romans turned it into a horror show because that is what sold tickets. King Minos needed a hidden prison. Daedalus built a labyrinth. Theseus needed a victory. Ariane provided a thread. The prince needed a family. He got isolation, starvation, and a public execution. The truth needed to be suppressed. The myth needed to be born. The bull needed to be imaginary. The shame needed to be real. The Athenians needed a hero. The Cretans needed a lie. The Romans needed a monster. The textbooks need a correction. And you right now need to ask yourself how many other monsters in our stories are just people we decided were too ugly to love. When Theseus walked out of the labyrinth, he told the crowd that the beast was dead. He held up a blood-stained cloth and declared that Crete was free. The people cheered. They did not ask to see the body. They did not ask for proof. They wanted a hero, and he gave them one. But the boy who died in the courtyard that day never asked to be born, never asked to be hidden, and certainly never asked to be remembered as a monster. He was a prince named Asterion, and his only crime was that his face did not match his father's expectations. The next time you hear a story about a terrifying creature locked in a maze, pause and wonder. What if the maze was the only home he ever had? What if the monster was just a mirror? And what if the real beast was the king standing outside the door, pretending to protect the world from his own reflection?